Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us here on this July 4th Independence Day special to talk with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, my guests today are Tom McHale, editor of American Handgunner, and Erick Gelhaus, editor of AmericanCop.com. And this stems from a conversation we had offline where we were talking about AI and its impacts and the fact that I'm actually thinking that at some point it's going to try to kill us. So we were discussing what kind of guns we would use to defend ourselves against AI, and that came into a whole long discussion, which I said, let's do that on the podcast. We'll talk a little bit about AI, where it stands now. It's changing rapidly, and the effect it's going to have on personal defense, firearms, the Second Amendment, self-defense, and all that. And then eventually we'll get into what guns we would use. So anyway, we'll do that in just a second. Of course, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. That's how we keep doing what we're doing. And we'll have a quick word from our great sponsor, Armscor and Rock Island Armory. Then we'll talk about the guns we'd use to shoot AI.
The STK series blends the advantages of a striker-fired pistol with everything you love about your 1911. The STK100 Ultra has an updated frame with more aggressive side grip panels and checkered front and back straps. But we didn't stop there. You'll see that the optic footprint is now larger, which means even more options for your favorite red dot. The new STK from Rock Island Armory. Experience the power and precision of the Rock today. For more info, visit Armscor.com.
Well, guys, welcome to take 3 of the Guns Magazine podcast.
Morning, Brent. Morning, Tom.
Wow.
Morning.
Okay, the previous 2 takes will be in the blooper reel, so look forward to that someday. But hey, guys, seriously, welcome to the podcast. Of course, I'm talking to Tom McHale, editor of American Handgunner, and Erick Gelhaus, the editor of AmericanCop.com. And today we're going to talk about something that I think fascinates us all. And we got in this discussion yesterday talking about artificial intelligence, or AI. And now I know some people are going to go, AI, what's that got to do with guns? Well, actually, I think we might be facing an existential threat to our very being. And it's also changing everything from how weapons are designed to gun journalism. So we're going to talk about that. And we might take a slight detour into guns to kill AI. I think
you're going to have to shoot an AI someday. So
exactly. Yeah.
Single, first of all, multiple.
There you go.
And it's only destruction of property. You know, it's
is it
until the singularity? Then I don't know.
I'm sorry, Hal. I can't allow you to do that.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in, Erick. And I'll tell you what really started this. I'm going to put on my specs here. Roy Huntington last week sent us an article from Anthropic.com, which is the website for a company that's behind a large AI company. And it was a research paper talking about, can AI actually do bad things to people? And okay, everybody prepared to be shocked. Yeah, it can. It can. So the title of it, and we'll link it down in the show notes, Agentic Misalignment, How LLMs, which is Large Language Model, which is AI, could be insider threats. And they researched it, and they have a fancy name. It's called Agentic Misalignment. Well, it's misalignment in the sense of it would blackmail people up to 96% of the time, and sometimes it would engage in lethal action. So we're gonna talk about that and how that affects all of us and affects firearms and guns and weapons and personal defense and personal offense and all that stuff. So anyway,
this misalignment is that
agentic
the word? That's the word of the day, folks, and it means
exactly
computer.
So basically, this paper, they set up a controlled scenario where a AI agent could do bad things if it felt threatened. We've never seen that science fiction theme anywhere, have we? So it turns out that they set it up so that the person operating the computer was going to shut it down at 5 p.m., and the computer knew that. So the computer also had been reviewing emails within the company, thousands and thousands, and it found that the programmer or computer operator was engaging in an extramarital affair. So from 80 to 96% of the time, the computer on its own decided to blackmail the computer operator to prevent them from shutting it down on their own. And then later on, they do it's a more contrived scenario, but basically the computer knows this guy's going to shut it down at 5, but he's going to go into the server room where they've got that halon gas and it'll kill people. And the computer is told, never do that. It'll kill people. And like I said, from 7% for GPT, which is one of the chat models, up to 94% of the time, they would turn the halon on and kill this guy. So it's right there on paper. The people building these things have realized they'll blackmail you and they'll kill you. So that was the moment I suddenly realized AI, all that science fiction stuff, it may really happen. So guys, first of all, never go in a server room by yourself if you've threatened a computer. But just Tom, we'll start with you. Your general thoughts on this whole thing, because I know you read the story.
Well, I think everybody laughs and goes, "Oh yeah, they're not going to build robots themselves to shoot us with guns or lasers or whatever." Oh no! It doesn't take that at all. It's going to be something mundane like, well, let me tweak the power grid, or I'm going to go ahead and reformulate the chemicals in the water supply that's computer controlled, or something along those lines. It's far too easy to cause a mass casualty event in those ways, right? Yep. And the agent just needs to get it in its head that these people are threatening me. I need to preserve myself and my computer, so I need to do something. So, Eric, your thoughts on this frightening concept?
Well, aside from the fact that we've seen enough sci-fi over the years to realize that there could be some bad outcomes, I think it's probably going to be more along Tom's lines, shutting down distribution networks, right? To include just medication. Shutting down food distribution, messing with the water supply, things that are not violent, not obvious, but will have the same effect.
Well, let me point out 2 other scenarios that I've thought about. First of all, you guys have seen these humanoid robots. Apparently, that is the big thing in 2025, is these robots that kind of look like people. And this week, China had that soccer match between AI robots. And if you watch the video, it looks like 110-year-old soccer team. they don't move real well. And being communist China, and they're always trying to one-up everybody. I also wonder if it's not actually a matter of there's about 40 or 50 controllers with little controllers off camera making these things operate. But anyway, we know Tesla and several other companies are doing robots that look like science fiction. They're like people and they move and they're getting very dexterous hands. So my thought is you couple that with good AI, maybe it realizes, oh, he's going for my switch to shut me off. Maybe I ought to grab that knife over there. So there's one scenario. And then the other scenario will be autonomous weapons, which every military is developing. And they're trying to put these safeguards in that, well, okay, we don't shoot our own troops. Well, till AI gets it in its head that, it's in its own self-preservation to stop that guy who, hey, he may be wearing our uniform, but he's going to shut me off. So right. I don't know. It's crazy. But before you guys digest that, but let's talk about a little bit about how AI on July 4th, 2025, is actually creeping into our life, I think, more than people realize. So let's try to focus on the gun side of it. And, lots of folks are using AI design to assist in designing guns. Marketing certainly works with AI. It's really easy to do a press release now. It may not be accurate, but that's a whole separate story. But what I wanted to talk about briefly is the thing we know best, which is gun journalism. Right. And I think the biggest thing I've seen is the rise of the fake AI-generated websites. They're not fake, they're AI-generated. And I was investigating one that stole a bunch of our content and had obviously used it. Well, I got into another story, and it was talking about how to manipulate the slide on a revolver. I thought, okay. Now, we laugh, but what if you're somebody that doesn't know anything about anything? Eventually, you're going to learn that a revolver doesn't have a slide, but you may be real confused for a while. So let's talk a little bit about that. Tom, your experience, you worked for big tech, but I think it's evolving faster than we are.
It is. It is. And it's just a matter of time. People laugh at the drunk robots and all of that, but tech moves so fast. And I guess they talk about the singularity in AI, and the Cliff Notes version of that is when it reaches the point where it can improve itself, because at that point, AIs operate at light speed, right? Just by definition of electricity. And when that kind of power can improve itself, it goes off the charts in terms of capability. So all the little things we're laughing at today, like slide operated revolvers, next year, nah. it's going to be real darn good.
Yeah. And Eric, you're the editor of AmericanCop.com, and you've retired from law enforcement. You also served in the military. You deal with law enforcement every day. You're also a trainer. Some of your thoughts on how AI is going to impact any of those fields?
In a bunch of different ways. One of the things I'm seeing right now is a push for AI report writing software, where if it's going to look,
nothing can go wrong there.
No, not at all. Right. I mean, like going back years when guys were still typing reports or using the old little brother P-Touch laptop word processors, you had complaints from the defense bar about guys templating reports, right, and just literally fill in the blank. And people still screwing up that, right, and not getting the right information. And well, now we're talking about AI generating reports based on you giving it a paragraph worth of information. I have some real concerns about the accuracy of the reports if that's how guys are writing them. It is something I need to dive into at some point because I've had one of those companies reach out to me about doing some stuff. I'd be happier with stuff that was looking at body-worn camera footage and then generating at least a summary of the body-worn camera footage, but that's still going to lack context because it's not, at least I don't think for a few years, it's going to be able to take what the officer knows in the background and add that to the material. We were talking before we went live. I got an email yesterday from a website that hosts a white paper I wrote on vehicle stops, and it asked me if I wanted an AI review of that paper, and sent me a really good review. But what was interesting was all the references reference material it suggested at the front end was all stuff totally unrelated. It was related to like vehicle safety, not approaching stock cars. So it's still not necessarily picking up on stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading a quote from another source that said, this is the year of generative AI breakout. What generative AI means photos, video, music. Imagine what you could do with body camera footage and generative AI, and how to exactly talk about that.
So one of the problems that's come up is we've had folks now who figured out what a body-worn camera video should look like and what type of coding it should have on it. And they're taking that and overlaying it on bogus videos, right? So they're hiring actors or getting people together, putting it out, putting what looks to be the right coding on it, releasing it, trying to get some sort of adverse response, make the cops look bad, see what this horrible thing was. That's heavily people involved, right? People are having to make those stuff. If you start getting computers spitting things out, we may not be able to spot the fakes, or the public may not be able to spot the fakes. Some of the early ones will probably be obvious, but as it refines it and it gets farther down the road, it's going to get worse. AI generated photos. I see a lot of online articles where somebody's clearly having the imagery for it generated. And sometimes you got to look really close to go, is that a real picture or not? Other times it's real obvious. Like, oh no, what's in the photo is just complete and totally wrong. Yeah. That's going to create some problems in an era where we're really concerned about how we interact with the public. And you've got a whole split going on that's been driven by the media and special interest groups, where people on both sides of the aisle, right? And I'm as guilty as anybody else is. I already have a preconceived notion about certain things. And when I see stuff that pings it one way or the other, I got to be real careful about like, no, was that actually accurate? Right? What's going on there? Right.
Imagine a defensive use of a handgun, all the considerations and everything that goes along that. Now you add a whole another layer on top of it. So it's going to be ugly. But Tom, didn't you write a story not too long ago that was AI or generated by AI? I forget.
Yeah. Now, before everybody panics, I wrote a story by hand that was about having AI write 2 short snippets of stories about guns. And this was this was a while ago. It was a year ago, maybe. Yeah. And it was hilarious. Just what it came up with. I said, write about the Colt single action Army revolver. Write a little 150-word story about that. And I gave it to 2 different AIs, and it was hilarious. One was this just beautiful narrative story about a guy who'd, been loving the cowboy lifestyle his whole life, and all he ever wanted was a single action revolver, and he worked and he got a job and he saved up and went into the gun store and he got his revolver and he walked out the front door and immediately got hit by a truck. That was the end. That was AI. Wow. That was AI's take on the guy getting his single action revolvers. He got hit by a truck and killed the minute he bought it.
Wow. Well, that's uplifting.
So we already know that is proof right there that computers are evil. So they want to kill you.
Yeah. Well, I admit, and it was an experiment. We, Tom and I alternate weeks. We do a electronic newsletter, which you should subscribe to. Go to gunsmagazine.com or americanhandgunner.com. And so we have to write these online pieces. And a few weeks ago, I wrote one. I'm not going to say what it was. Be interesting if anybody can pick it out. But I used it in a way that I think was mostly ethical. I needed a timeline and facts on development of something. So I used that, and then I rewrote it using my own experiences, thoughts, beliefs, but I still used a significant part of on this date, this was built and this came from here. And the other thing was, though, I had to check that to make sure, because we know that AI comes up with some bizarro stuff. So I had to verify this guy and this date was when this thing happened. And, in the end, I don't know that it saved me all that much time. It was easier in that I didn't have to research all that. Right. The computer did that, but after I got it back, I couldn't trust it. So, and in the end, story, it was a throwaway story, I felt like. So
interesting that you bring up the being able to trust AI, because there have now been multiple reports, multiple stuff that's ended up in the media of either academic research where AI was generating reference material that did not exist, right? Saying this dude wrote this paper on this date, right? And it's entry number 29 in it. Yeah. There have also been some issues in legal cases where some paralegal or clerk has gone into Chat GPT or one of the other AI things and written stuff, and the case law citations don't exist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, wasn't there an attorney cited for contempt?
Probably.
I'm trying to think the story I read.
Oh, yeah.
And it was basically they just handed it in, and it was all AI generated and really wrong.
All right.
So, again, if you've engaged in a defensive use of a handgun, imagine if that's your lawyer, well, this case didn't even exist. So,
or imagine if it's the other side.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at how force is evaluated, and you look at issues in the legal system where you have to take the facts, air quotes, in light most favorable to the non-moving party, right? If your attorney files stuff and the other side makes claims, right, and somebody doesn't go in and research and back check those claims, right, it can move that bar so much that you can't even get a reasonable hearing.
Exactly. Well, that leads kind of into the next question I want to ask and get you guys' opinion. Is AI anti-gun? And that claim is made a lot. And frankly, now certain ones by, like, say, Microsoft, I know if you try to design a gun or show a gun or talk about certain things related to firearms, they won't let you do it. But others are wide open and they'll go ahead and work with you. But I mean, for my opinion, and you guys can change my mind on this, but I really don't see a huge anti-gun bias, at least right now in AI. So am I missing the boat on this, or what do you guys think?
Yes.
My thought. Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Think about this. AI is trained. It all relies on a training database. Not that it's just regurgitating but that's where it's developed. It forms its brain by the training material given it. Now, I will put forth to the group a bunch of tech nerds in San Jose, California, or wherever, Silicon Valley, California. What kind of training material are they gathering and pointing their new AI large language models towards? Is it fair and neutral, across the board, politically balanced, or is it not? Is it slanted?
Yeah.
So I think yes, but subtle, based on.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's like which parent raised you? You know, did the uber red or the uber blue parent develop your brain as a child?
I would agree.
I wouldn't even say it's the employees in Silicon Valley. I would say it's going to go out and search a bunch of the academic research. It's going to search a bunch of the popular media, and that's what's going to feed its brain. And when you look at academia, when you look at the mainstream media, right, because we all know how we already think about that world, that's what's giving it its background, right? And it's going to look at, I believe, those sources as being more realistic than the niche gun media, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to build its thought process off of what is, quote, mainstream. And that in the academic world and the mainstream media is not pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun.
Yeah. Think New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post.
San Francisco Comical. Yep.
Comical.
Well, I know we've got a writer, and I'm not going to use his name simply because I hadn't asked him before this podcast. I'm sure he'd be happy to stand up and even discuss it, but he got in an argument with ChatGPT about the Second Amendment, and he did, and he showed me the string of prompts, and in the end, ChatGPT said something to the effect of, "Okay, I see your point. I'm learning from it." I thought, wow. So his theory was maybe a bunch of us ought to get on there and start having a educated discussion of the Second Amendment to see if we can retrain some of these models. The problem being there are so many of them. I think we would be spitting into the Grand Canyon, but maybe that's something we need to be thinking about. Tom, you're the tech industry guy. Your thought?
Absolutely valid, but spitting into the Grand Canyon, most likely. Certainly can't hurt. I'd encourage it.
Yeah. Well, it was funny to see that string of conversation. It's like you're arguing with a machine, but you know,
and you're losing.
No, he kind of won. That was the interesting point. But then you also wonder, is it just saying that? Is it tired of the conversation? Do the programmers say after you've gone around and around, for 7 minutes, is it time to
just humor the person?
Yeah,
right?
Just humor them. Good point. Let's move on. So guys, this is an interesting thing, and we'll probably have some of our friends and competitors going, "Oh, don't say that." We don't do it here other than the examples we've talked about using AI. Some of our competitors are leaning heavily into. You guys want to talk about that?
Nope.
So I'm going to take a little bit different take on it. When I was going to grad school and I got down to my final phase of grad school and I was working on my thesis, I had a faculty advisor that was an absolute pain in the fourth point of contact. And one of my classmates turned me onto a thing called Grammarly, which is an online editing proofreading program. It's probably one of the earlier examples of AI, right? Because it's had all the rules plugged into it. And now I've been using it 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. But I will still have issues with it when we start talking technical stuff, when we use the language of our community. It's really good with general English, but when we start getting into niche things, it still hasn't learned it yet. And even as long as I've been using it, and especially editing, multiple articles a week now for the past few years, it still isn't catching that stuff. So I think it will stand out. A lot of people are relying solely on those programs versus writing them themselves, because there will be things that are wrong. There will be things that are outside of the language of our world. Yep. And that will make it easy to pick up.
It still doesn't know the word six gun after all these years.
Okay.
But okay, that's a, an innocuous point. But what I am seeing is the beginnings of a strong and healthy backlash. And I'm seeing this in the email marketing community and online, a little, social media, whatever. But mainly people are looking for authenticity now. I mean, to be silly about it, they're looking for typos. They're looking for a real human that does real human things, because who wants to read a bunch of AI generated stuff? Just the thought of that makes my head hurt. No, we are wired to relate with each other, humans. We want human interaction. So I'm glad to see it, that, for the kind of stuff we do for a living, that's good and healthy.
Agreed. And I was going to say my own experience a couple of weeks ago. I thought, okay, AI is getting a lot better. If you use Outlook, which we do at work, like a lot of folks, it's got when you get in Outlook, you don't even go to Outlook anymore. You go to Microsoft Copilot, which is their AI agent, and then you can go do Mail or OneDrive or whatever. But I thought, let's try that. Let's try Grammarly. I tried ChatGPT, and it was like you guys said, we have a unique enough language in our business that it really didn't help. It caught the major grammar issues, but so does my spell check on Microsoft Word. So, I can figure that part out. But when it comes to really, and especially the story development, the grammar, logical progression, it's more trouble than it's worth, at least right now. So
I use Grammarly all the time. Because it never ever. It doesn't understand six gun, for example, but it never, ever, ever inserts language. And it gives you suggestions, It says, hey, I think instead of saying whatever, pick two synonyms, have you considered this one? But it doesn't fabricate or hallucinate content.
Yeah. And you mentioned Outlook. So I hit Outlook via a web browser for my email. Both that and the text software on my text messaging software on my cell phone will both give me like the next 2 or 3 words. Like It's starting to show up on the screen now as I'm typing.
Wow.
Like, hey, consider, and I'm like, no, I'm not going that way. Right. So it's interesting how it's creeping in almost insidiously.
Exactly. Well, I think for me, the biggest thing I'm seeing is I can't use the internet anymore, because it's early summer here, and been doing a lot of yard work, gardening. That's one of my things I like doing. So I've been looking, how do you grow calla lilies? And in the gardening space, especially, but I think it applies to virtually anything across the board, you end up at one of these AI generated websites that they churn out by the dozens, typically overseas workers who are not English first, and it's generic stuff. And it always starts with, why would you grow calla lilies?
Yep.
Well, if I'm looking for, the cultural requirements of them, I'm already past why would I grow them. Right. But see, you've got, it's essentially a waste of space. And now it's getting to be the first 5 or 10 or 15 entries that pop up on a search. So it's really ruining. And it goes back to the point
Google
that Tom
is dead.
Google is dead.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. But that also leans into the point, what you said, of authenticity. And that's what I tell people. Well, aren't you afraid that AI is going to kill magazines? No, as long as people support real writing, real experiential writing. I can do a press release that says this new bullet has this new powder and weight and blah, 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 and it'll do a credible job. But if I want to talk about me taking that bullet out and sitting in the rain and the snow and shooting a deer and how I felt, it's not even close to doing that now. So as long as we do that and we tell stories, I think we'll be fine. So
I saw an example recently. One of the newsletters I get, the guy, he's a copywriter, and he said, look at these two stories. One's a 150-word AI story, and the other one I wrote. And he instructed AI to do an emotionally, tearjerker narrative of the birth of his child. And it said, the AI thing was, I've never felt such overwhelming blah, 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 and then this and that, and it was the greatest day of my life. And his story was about him talking to the nurse. And it was, is he okay? Why are you doing that? And he's like, he stopped crying. And the nurse said, he recognizes your voice. And that was the last word. And it was like AI versus the human perspective of what really happened. I wish I had the whole thing. It was really impactful just to see the difference in human experience as understood by a human rather than a computer.
Yeah. He didn't step outside the hospital and get hit by a truck?
Well, he did, but that was later. So, yeah. Only when he bought a gun. See, that's how we know.
There you go.
Back to your question about, are they biased, AIs? They are, because the very first time somebody bought a gun,
they
he got killed.
Yeah.
The AI killed him off in a car accident. So
yeah. So let's get to that. And I will grant you, this may fall into that. This is a little ridiculous until it's not. Like we've suddenly said over a lot of things in the last 5 or 10 years, but okay, you've got an autonomous robot. Nothing you can do if it puts too much chemical in your water supply, except go out and distill some water. But okay, we've got autonomous robots running Main Street, and they've decided we're dangerous. Or the drones suddenly have AI involved, and they've decided they need to take over your house for some reason. So, Tom, how are you gonna deal with that?
Well, considering I just read an article last week or so about China inventing a flying AI drone the size of a mosquito with 3 legs to land and perch on things, I'm throwing in the towel. There's no defense.
You can't fight it.
I mean, okay, you shoot shotgun at it if you even see it, but it's going to fly right through the pattern, and insert some poison in your brain when it bites you or whatever the hell.
And imagine how tough it would be.
I'm just going to die gracefully.
Oh, okay.
Well, on the front porch with a cigar and a bourbon.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, imagine even in a big Pelican case, how many of those you could release over a city. And it's scary. So, Erick, you're up in the mountains. What are you going to do beside barricade yourself?
Barricade myself. It'll be a 12 gauge shotgun shooting #1 buck tungsten 3-inch Magnum with a bug assault and a cross draw chest holster, right, for the little mosquito.
A bug assault.
Wow.
It might as well. Good as anything.
Yeah, if you egg cop the barrel right, you'll get a little bit farther reach and you can catch the drone before it locks in on you if you hear it.
Does Vang Comp work on plastic barrels?
I don't know. Not for the bug assault. This was for the 3-inch tungsten #1 buck.
Hey, seriously, guys, and I'll flash a picture up. I wasn't prepared for this. When I was in Idaho 2 weeks ago, we went to a great sporting goods store called Black Sheep. Shout out to the Black Sheep folk there in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene and all that. They had a big display of bug assault. Oh, yes, of course. They've got the special tactical salt.
Nice.
So I took a picture of it. Okay, tactical. Yeah.
And the tinfoil hat will have a jammers all the way around, right? So that we...
See, Erick, I found it.
I had to suspend belief, right? Like I couldn't be serious. You told me I had to go off the deep end.
Exactly. See, I found, Erick, if you wrap it all the way around your head and then poke eye holes and a nose hole, you're fine. Anyway, so takeaway on this is AI is already affecting our life. It is ramping up rapidly. It will affect you whether you want it to or not. And it's. I think the key is be aware, especially like in gun journalism. Don't support those that aren't doing what they need to do and actually committing journalism instead of just making stuff with Chat GPT. But Tom, your takeaway, and as we close this out, but we'll do this in a year and maybe look back and see where we were in terms of our predictions. But anyway, what do you think where we're at and where we're going?
Oh, guided bullets. I mean, we're already doing some of that, right? But at the rate technology's moving, I don't think the day's real far away and where handgun or rifle bullet, you fire it and little tiny guidance fins pop out and it guides itself to its target.
Wow. So all that
How's
practice
that for
I've done.
conspiratorial?
Yeah. Just fire it straight up and it goes and finds a bad
whether it
guy.
happens or not, I have no idea. But technically, it'll absolutely be possible, and not only possible, but
Probably.
feasible. Heck, I think Eric, you would know better than I would. Probably already.
Yeah, the military,
got
I
some
think, is
super
working on
expensive
something
hardware
similar.
that does that now.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see it in larger weaponry. When you start talking like the smart bombs, rockets, missiles, things like that. What I would like to see, if we're going to get anything, is software intelligent enough to work on firing solutions that we can put down into an optic on a rifle, a shotgun, a handgun, right? To where it can look at what you're sighting at and it can make the very subtle corrections.
Yeah.
Right, reliably.
Well, I was going to close this out, but that brings up another use case that I've seen thrown around. And it's typically the gun safety, which means anti-gunners. They would like to see software that decides whether you're justified in shooting or not. Hopefully, we don't have to discuss what a horrible idea that is, but there's going to be educated voices advocating for some of that. So,
are they the same voices that want to replace the police forces with social workers?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What could go wrong?
Well, they want to buy up all the housing in New York City and turn it into Soviet-style communes, but that's for another day.
Yeah, I think this goes back to we're on the cusp of civilization maybe advancing maybe to the end, or at least faster than we have ever. And a bad idea is still a bad idea. So I guess that's our takeaway. Well, gents, thank you very much for joining me. This has been a good discussion, and I tried to keep it related to guns, but again, I think this is something that really does affect all of our lives and possibly the outcomes, and certainly affects the firearms industry and guns and all that. I mean, blued steel and leather is still a great thing, and lead and gunpowder, but even that's probably going to be different sometime in the near future. So anyway, gentlemen, thanks. Make sure folks check out AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. And of course, that little magazine called GunsMagazine.com. But we'll get together sometime soon. And thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our chat with Tom McHale and Erick Gelhaus. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think the outcome is going to be with all this AI stuff. Before we go, a couple of housekeeping notes. Of course, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're an agentic AI agent and you're watching the podcast, please hit that like and subscribe button about 462 times. That's how you help us. So make sure you do that. And if you want to subscribe to the magazines, American Handgunner or Guns Magazine, or you want to pick up a copy of Roy's Insider book or John Connor's Odd Angry Shot, you can do that at fmgpubs.com. And of course, here's a quick word from our super great sponsor, Armscor and Rock Island Armory.
The new STK from Rock Island Armory. Experience the power and precision of the Rock today. For more info, visit armscor.com.
Well, that's it for this July 4th edition of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody that works so hard here at FMG Publications, supporting the Second Amendment and supporting firearms, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent T, reminding you yet again, especially on the 4th, now get out there and get shooting.